Hello and welcome to the eTech podcast with me, your host, Ryan Maughan. I have been involved in the development of electrified vehicles and machines since 2005 as an engineer and a business leader. This podcast is the product of my passion for electric and autonomous vehicle technology. I'm here to share knowledge from some of the world's leading experts as well as my own insights. Join me as we accelerate the transition to cleaner, safer and smarter vehicles and grow the industry around the world. So for today's podcast, we've got something a little bit special. It's a fireside chat between me and a really fascinating guy called Colin Herron. Colin is one of the UK's leading experts on electric vehicle infrastructure. He's been a driving force in the electric vehicle scene in the UK, instrumental in helping to get Nissan to put their Leaf production in the UK, in his role in the RDA. He's been in the automotive industry for many, many years. And it's absolute pleasure to get him and have this really interesting conversation about electric vehicles, about charging infrastructure, about trends and what's happening in the industry and where he sees things going. So without further ado, we'll get on to the main podcast. If you'd like to introduce yourself, Colin, that would be great.
Name is Colin Herron. I'm Managing Director of a small EV consultancy called Zero Carbon Futures. It's quite unique. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of an FE college, Gateshead College, and we're a not-for-profit organisation and we're basically non-aligned. And
where did Zero Carbon Futures come from? How did that? Because it's quite an interesting story in terms of how that came into existence.
The story started with me because I used to work for Nissan for 17 years and I was seconded to the Regional Development Agency. And I was in charge of automotive, and then I got involved with the negotiations for the Nissan Leaf and the battery plant coming to the UK. Then we were putting the first regional infrastructure in. In essence, Labour lost the election, the Conservatives came in, closed the RDAs. So I had a discussion with Gateshead College, they loaned some money, and out of that, 7 years ago was born Zero Carbon Futures.
So and infrastructure, that was sort of charging.
The first infrastructure we put in, because back in those days there was only 3 7 kilowatt chargers.
Right.
So we put about 600 points across the whole of the northeast, and then we put one of the first ever 50 kilowatt chargers in, and we put 12 in essence. So we did the first regional network of rapid chargers.
And that's that sort of charging infrastructure side of things, that's become the main sort of operational thing that you do now.
Well, it was,
right.
But what happened, we put in all of Ecotricity's electric highway, then we started working with 4 of the big EV companies, Volkswagen, BMW, Renault, Nissan, and we did a European project putting more in. But what actually happened was we started to research what other people were doing, the car companies, etc., looking into what was being said. And because we're neutral, we started to pick up contracts with cities.
Right.
And the big thing with cities is the amount of information and social media and press, which is misleading, is tremendous. And what we found was they simply wanted an honest broker to talk to them and somebody to advise on what buses are coming, what trucks are coming, what vehicles, how many, in what quantities, where to put charge points, what is consumer behaviour. So we still do put infrastructure in, but our main focus now is actually as a consulting body facilitating cities to adapt.
Wow, that's quite incredible, really. That's part of an FE college, as that's sort of the whole history behind that and how it's got to where it's got to is it's fascinating.
Well,
probably unique, I would say.
In essence, Gateshead College is, if you take the extreme, we've now been commissioned by Sadiq Khan, so we're advising London's EV strategy to 2025.
Right.
So for a college in Gateshead to be advising Sadiq Khan on his strategy, and the deputy mayors, as I was in London yesterday, is quite a journey.
And do you think that's because Gateshead still has quite a close tie-up with Nissan, and it's all sort of intertwined?
It has, but the Nissan has become a training provider under the new regulations. Right. So there's still a relationship, but I'm not sure it's as strong as it used to be.
So it's fairly safe to say then that you're probably one of the an expert authority in terms of charging infrastructure and kind of EV deployment and things like that in the UK. He's blushing now.
People keep saying that. Yes, we get asked to do lots of talks. We've just been commissioned by Manchester, Sheffield. We're working with Cardiff, and we work with other authorities and airports around the world, because in short, there is so much misinformation out there, and the numbers of EVs that will be on the road by 2020, 13 million, 3 million, 6 million, that lots of people are really confused. And one of the sympathies I have, in each local council, there is one person sitting at a desk, overnight becomes the EV adoption expert.
Right, yeah.
And they need help. They need help.
Do you find, is it getting better in terms of like people? I can remember. So we worked on a project with you guys way back under the RDA, which was to look at EV adoption, and people still talked about milk floats a lot.
Yes.
And there was this sort of perception about EVs all just basically being a little bit rubbish, and I don't hear the milk float thing as much anymore.
No, but there was a study very recently where 52% of the people questioned didn't think an EV could go through a car wash.
Right, okay.
So we still, one of the problems is it's a fallback. So when you say to people, why won't you buy an EV? They cost too much, there's no infrastructure, and they don't go very far.
Yeah.
There's a 6-month waiting list for every EV. They do go quite a long way now, and there's so much infrastructure, it's underutilised.
Yeah. There's been some massive, like the infrastructure business. I just yesterday was hearing about ChargePoint and their plans to put in like millions of new charge points, and then we had the big thing with Shell, BP, taking over ChargeMaster. Shell have invested in what's the sort of big activity going on at the minute in the infrastructure world?
Land grab.
Right. Okay.
In essence, the first things that you need is land.
Yeah.
So if you look at the centre of a city, there's petrol stations there.
Yeah.
But finding a patch of land the same size as a petrol station in a city to put 10 rapid chargers is a challenge.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. So everybody's looking at inventive ways of releasing land. So they're talking to landowners like the Network Rail, people who own land, to try if they can repurpose it for another use. So a lot of what's going on is land grab.
Yeah.
The second one, which I believe, is shareholder appeasement.
Right, okay. So you mean companies trying to basically appear to be doing the right thing? That could be what's
potentially, yes.
Not.
So for little cost, people are buying into the EV market.
Yeah. Yeah, still, I do wonder, because the dynamic is going to change in terms of like the oil companies they have all their sort of oil exploration and digging it out of the ground, but then actually Shell and BP have got massive retail businesses, and that retail dynamic is going to change, because you don't have to go to a petrol forecourt to get petrol or diesel anymore. You can plug in pretty much wherever you want. So, I almost, rather than the oil production side of their business being under threat, I do wonder how much of it's connected to the retail arm of their business being under threat, because they're essentially their fuel stations could become obsolete. If everyone's plugged into a 3 kilowatt point when they're at work, in the car park at their office, you never need to go near a petrol station again. No.
So we're watching the dynamic of the oil companies losing their market share. We've also got the electric companies thinking, this is our business, we should be in it. We've got the car companies like the Ionity system thinking, well, we can sell electricity, why don't we do it? And then you've got other groups like the water utilities and other people saying, why don't we do it?
Yeah.
And people like Transport for London have got their own power grid.
Yeah.
Could we sell it? So the market itself, and I think this is going to be tremendous MBA territory for the next 5 or 6 years. The people who are coming in the marketplace are saying, well, I've got the land, I can buy the charger, why don't I just sell it?
Yeah. Yeah, the barrier to entry is potentially quite low if you've got the land, and of course the grid connection. That's the other big sort of obstacle, isn't
Exactly.
it?
So
Typically.
National Grid are getting interested. You've got the DNOs are interested, and you've got new models coming out. So, for instance, if you have a bus depot and you charge the buses overnight, the bus depot is empty during the day,
Yeah,
and all those charges are doing nothing.
yeah,
So there's other people thinking laterally of there's another business model here.
yeah.
So the bus company could
Got
sell
it.
electricity to a fleet company.
Got it. And do you think, because I was talking to a guy, where were they? Who owned an EV anyway, and he was basically complaining about the relatively high cost of getting electricity through the sort of pay to charge type systems compared to essentially what he pays for his electricity at home. And I hadn't really thought about that before. And he was basically saying to me, you'd have to be mad or not have the ability to charge at home, to charge on the paid for charge sort of public infrastructure compared to charging at home. I mean, is that I'd never ever heard anyone say that before. This was like 2 weeks ago, so it was a new thing. I don't know if that's a real...
One of the problems we've got is a rapid charger to install is £40,000 to £50,000.
Wow, okay.
Right? And nobody wants to pay for the electricity.
Yeah.
So it's a loss-making business.
Yeah.
So when you actually work out on the number of EVs, the number of rapid chargers, how much it would cost with the maintenance cost, etc., it's quite a lot per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
Companies like Ecotricity are now saying, okay, so if you take your domestic electricity from me, I'll reduce your rapid charge price to the same as your domestic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we've now got E.ON and EDF all starting to say, right, so there's a chance that we could lose our domestic market to EV owners because these new markets are opening. So they're starting to offer rates. So there's a plethora of rates, and the one that it's becoming a little bit like your train ticket.
Okay.
So you turn up in Newcastle
That's
this
probably
morning,
not a good thing, right?
you want to buy a train to London, it's £135.
Yeah.
I'm going down in a couple. So if you are driving somewhere and you desperately want to charge,
right, yeah, you're going to pay the premium.
yes, but what we're seeing is people are paying the premium as you do on the motorway, just to get you as far as you want. Then you go to the local spa.
Yeah, and I guess people do that now with petrol and diesel. So particularly some of the guys who work at Avid do make me laugh because they're very hawkish in terms of like £5 in the motorway services, and then if you're listening, you know who you are, and then they go and fill up at the local Tesco's or whatever. Which it makes sense because it's money in your pocket at the end of the day.
The government, to be quite frank, did make a bit of a mistake on this incentive, because in Newcastle you get free parking, free electric.
Yeah, and they're rolling back the free parking thing, aren't they? I saw something about
correct,
that.
Because in the zone around the central station, you would get hybrids appear at 6 o'clock while the driver got the train to London. Yeah, come back at 8 o'clock at night. Yeah, and the car's been there all day, and they save £15 parking.
No, so that. Well, there's two things that I've got to say. I don't know if I'm daft or what. I always pay for my parking. So when I park in Newcastle on a charge point, I actually pay for the parking as well, which I know I don't have to do at the moment, but I just sort of do that because I feel like it's a bit wrong that I'm kind of not. So charge point blocking, that's a big thing. So, and like we have this here, so we've got charge points here. They're 7 kilowatts. And I'm wondering about the next charge points we put in, whether or not actually that's too big, because most of the time the cars are sitting. So like the train station is a really good example. You have probably parked the car there for hours, 5, 6, 7 all day. I mean, the airport's the other one where they've got the sort of relatively high power charge points in the airport car park, and you're going to be on those for days.
Yes.
Would we actually be better with more 3 kilowatt points, like go right to the other end, but just loads of them?
It's interesting.
Like measles.
We've been with the TfL contract. We've run 3 workshops, and we're inviting all sorts of people and forums. And we ask the question of who wants them, where do they want them, where they get the energy, etc. And everybody says we need to put lots of 3.7s at supermarkets. I say, well, hang on. My car's now got a 130-mile range. Yeah. Most people's supermarket is within 2 miles.
Yeah.
if I plug it on for an hour, I get 12 miles range.
Yeah.
And I've also got to take the cable out.
Yeah.
Then I've got to unplug it and put the cable back before I put the shopping in for 12 miles. So one of the questions where,
you're going to be bothered.
Is my wife really going to do that? Am I going to do that?
Yeah.
No. So one of the things we're saying is, well, if Sainsbury's had 15 Rapids and you put it on for an hour and you did your shopping, you might do that. So the problem we have is not a problem until the people who buy the electric vehicles don't have a drive.
Yeah.
So most of the people you have a look at who have an electric vehicle now, they've got a drive. They've got some means of charging it.
Yeah.
Because there's not a Rapid in Newcastle at the moment, but we're still buying the things.
Yeah.
So it's not a problem. So one of this thing with the TfL, and we'll work through this methodology, is people say, supermarkets.
Yeah.
Well, where's your nearest supermarket? Oh, it's 2 miles away.
Yeah. I saw again the other day for the first time someone talking about charge rates, and it might just be I've missed this completely, but they were talking about charge rates in terms of miles per hour, and I thought that's a really smart, because everyone gets obsessed with, well, it takes 10 hours to fill the battery up, it's insane.
Yeah.
Whereas actually it's more like, well, yeah, but how many miles that takes 10 hours to fill that battery up, because it's massive. But how many miles is that? Well, it's 400 miles. Okay, well, you only need to do that like once every 2 weeks or something.
There is this, another one which I get really upset about is, it's the phrase, when we all plug in at 6 p.m. To which I point out, if we all went to the petrol station every night at 6 p.m, you'd have 3,500 cars per petrol station and the system would collapse.
Yeah.
I'm beyond why people think that if they've got a 15-mile commute and 200-mile range, why every night they'll plug in.
Do you know why? I think I know why. I think it's because they're so used to plugging their mobile phone in every night.
Well,
and they can't detach in their head that there's a difference between how a mobile phone performs and how this massively different battery in a car performs.
The only difference is when you're paying for a very expensive battery and the handbook says do not keep it at 100% full or you'll damage your battery.
Yeah.
I think the mind goes between, I may damage a £5,000 battery as opposed to a phone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I know, I hold on to this as well because it's once I dine out on this story. I do know a guy, again, if he's listening, he knows who he is, who has an electric car. He's on his second one now. And strangely, he does have a driveway. I think he just basically couldn't be bothered to install a charge point at home.
Yeah,
he gets by. Like he had Zoe. He's got a second generation Zoe, and you know what? He manages with public infrastructure as it is. It's not a major inconvenience. He charges up when he goes swimming. He charges up when he goes, and he might charge his car once a week, and that's the real big. It's not an everyday thing, and I think a lot of people think it's an everyday thing.
When I had the 24 kilowatt, it was slightly different.
Yeah.
But at the moment, if we look out the window, you can see my Leaf.
Yeah. Is that a nice white?
That's a nice, it's a dirty white 30 kilowatt
Leaf,
hour, and it's not on your charge points.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because it's full.
Yeah. And do you charge it up every night, or
no? It's been at the weekend. We did a sortie up to Embleton round and came back. So no, I didn't charge it then. So I charged it last night.
Yeah.
Because I've been away.
Yeah.
And it'll get charged again. Probably this is Thursday. Probably on Monday.
So that drive from where you live up to sort of Embleton and out into Northumberland, that's quite a decent drive there.
It is. And on the 24, this is where the question about normalised behaviour, when I had the 24 kilowatt, I could get about 86 miles.
Right.
And you knew where you could get to and back.
Yeah.
Right. And if somebody in the car said, let's go here, you go, hang on. There's a rapid over there.
Yeah.
But even the difference between
range anxiety,
between 86 and 130 mile range, is completely different.
Right.
So I can get the Lake District in that quite comfortably now,
with just a 30 kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And of course you've got the new 40 and the 60.
60.
Wow.
So if I have the 40, which I will get next year, it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah. You just don't even have to think about charging anymore.
No.
And so I'd had thought for a while that these basically 60 for most people for an average car. So and Tesla's a bit different because they're big cars anyway.
Yeah.
So, but a normal car, a 60 kilowatt hour probably does
That's 240 miles.
99% of what most people do all the time. You know, and if in a lot of cases it's maybe a bit too big, which you could be proving there if you're 30s.
Well, that's
fine.
one of the questions that I've spoken to some of the Nissan people, and they've said they actually think 40 will be the normal.
And is this where you get into potential? Because at the moment, one of the things people talk about a lot is vehicle to grid. But with the old cars, with the 24 kilowatt hour car, it was impossible to imagine how that could work because you needed all the power in the car. With the 30, but is that maybe where vehicle to grid comes in? Because if you had a 60 in the car, you're going to have quite a bit of overhead in your battery that could then be used.
You are.
Yeah.
I mean, the feed-in tariffs have to change because at the moment the feed-in tariff's 4 pence.
Right.
It's 16 pence at home. So I'm going to lose 12 pence per kilowatt hour every kilowatt hour I give to the grid.
Right, so you don't
and I've got
do
to buy the interface hardware. you know. And so that's only going to work if an aggregator signs me up and says it might get used, it might not, but the grid will pay you £100 a year just in case it does.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. If an aggregator wants to do all my electric that way, but I don't think when I was down at Millbrook last week, there was a V2G domestic unit. Yeah. £9,000.
That's quite pricey. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I lose 12 pence per kilowatt hour at the moment.
Yeah. You maybe only would do that, I guess, if you had solar. And you could, I don't know. It's difficult. It's difficult.
5,000 for solar, 9,000 for the interface, and
it's quite. We were a little bit sore about losing a V2G development contract. Maybe it's not such a problem.
It's got to be mass aggregators, and to be honest, where I live, I'm on an estate of about 500 houses. Everybody's got a drive. Yeah. And I have the EV. Yeah. And I've had the EV for 5 years.
So there's quite a bit of room for more EVs.
Well, part of the problem is, and I'm often seen on LinkedIn on this, if you want to buy a BEV now, it's at least an 8-month waiting list. Yeah,
there seems to be. It's interesting. A lot of people talking about and it haven't really taken off, but it does seem to be capacity constrained right now.
Completely capacity constrained.
Yeah, we certainly found that ordering company cars and even going back in the last year, you 6-month waits, 9-month waits, indeterminate waits, depending on what car you want.
Well, there's a lady contacted me and she bought a Hyundai Ioniq in January. Yeah, she hasn't got it yet.
Yeah. I think I hear that as a fairly common. And even for Leafs and things, it's still...
Leaf is February, if you order now.
Long waits. Yeah. Be interesting to see how that pans out. I was expecting a massive inrush with the Hyundai Kona, but the volumes that they're planning to send to Europe are tiny, really. Yeah,
I also heard that there's a main JLR dealer going to get 7 I-Pace.
Yeah. So
we're not going to...
It's not going to be a massive flood onto the market.
There is a lot of battery capacity being built on mainland Europe at the moment. Yeah. And if you took an average 50 kilowatt hour battery, it comes to about 2 million vehicles. Yeah. But that's by 2024. Yeah. So I think, and I've been talking to people, that there's going to be a problem for the next 3 years. Yeah. Because there's an awful lot of diesels to get rid of. And they'll be heavily discounted before they'll switch into more capacity.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the manufacturers do. One of the things that's always on the infrastructure side again, that sort of, I don't know if it's a myth or I always argue against this, but you get a lot of people saying, "Oh, the grid will collapse and we couldn't cope with there's all these problems with the grid." And there's some interesting solutions on that. You mentioned battery capacity, people building battery plants. And there's sort of these concepts where they're using battery packs to locally store power for, do you see there being is there a real grid issue on the ground? What are people doing to fix that?
National Grid have been absolutely clear that they had what they call their 2-degree scenario, which is when there's 34 million electric vehicles. Yeah. Everybody plugs in at 6 p.m. when the Beast from the East 4 hits us in February 1 year. Yeah. So that could happen. Yeah. But it's not going to happen. Yeah. So what they've said is, at the moment, our electricity use is going down year by year by year.
Because of efficiencies with lighting and...
But to maintain the overall capacity. Yeah. So at night, we've actually got shed loads of power.
Yeah.
And most people are going to charge at night. Where we have got a challenge is localized grid overload.
Right. Okay.
Not cost a lot of money. So what all the DNOs are doing is doing hotspots.
Okay.
But they're doing inverse. They're doing cold spots.
Right. What's a cold spot?
A cold
How's that work?
spot is where there's actually lots of capacity.
Okay.
And that's where we should be putting hubs for people to go to.
Right. Right.
So there are cold spots and there's substations with enormous amounts of free. But the problem is the way the system works now is, if it was me and you, we go and buy a plot of land and
Yeah.
ask for a price connection,
Yeah.
which they would give us.
Yeah.
What they don't say is, if you could find a bit of land over there,
Yeah. Yeah.
it won't cost you the £1 million for the upgrade. There's loads of electricity.
Yeah. It's and of course there are. I mean, the industrial part that we're on is an old factory that's been split into different units.
Yeah.
And we've got an enormous substation for the size of. I mean, we've basically got a private substation for the admin business.
Yeah.
Which is massively underutilised. So I guess those old assets are out there.
Apparently there's three. I spoke to an EV director from National Grid, and he said he's got around 300 substations with loads of power.
Right. Yeah. Be interesting to see. It'd be interesting to see what they do, and whether or not this sort of local battery sort of grid reinforcement things do start to become more common.
But there's a challenge. Every battery that goes into battery storage is one less vehicle.
Right. So in terms of the competing priorities for the battery capacity, yeah. I know. So the battery kind of second life is a thing, but from what I can gather of that, the problem is basically the batteries are too good. So there's insufficient batteries coming out in the second life.
Yeah. Mine's guaranteed for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then one of the things I'm a mechanical engineer. I'm talking to the chemists now. They talk about a degradation of the battery. If it's linear from a 60 kilowatt and you lose 10% and you lose 6 kilowatts, that's not a problem.
Yeah.
It is on a 24 kilowatt, but apparently it's not. It's a internal cancer type description.
Right.
It gets beyond a point, then it accelerates and the battery dies.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get my head around this a bit. It's called dendrites, I believe.
Yeah, dendrite growth. Okay. That's
on the lithium plate.
On the lithium plate, and that can be quite bad actually. That's so I guess they pull them out. So probably when they're broke, they're really broke, and they can't be used for second life maybe. But it just is taking much longer to get to that point.
And the whole thing about the rapid charging is linked into this damage.
Yeah.
On the movement. So when we say it's a 50, one of the things I have to educate people with is if you go to a petrol station, a petrol pump is just a linear delivery.
Yeah.
A car determines the power it takes.
Yeah.
And the first 30 minutes is 80%.
Yeah.
The next 10% is 30 minutes.
Because it has, and then there's a thing there with something to do with the chemistry of the cell, and then also to do with the balancing system, the battery management, balancing cells out, and it can, it's. I think there's been some misunderstandings on a few car launches recently about the charging rate. People haven't understood the rate at which the car can charge at is different. Yeah. So if you say it can plug into a 100 kilowatt charger, that's different to saying it can charge at 100 kilowatts, because the car might say, I only want 60 kilowatts because that's all I can deal with, And
but I only want 60 for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to ease off because the amps drop off quite dramatically.
Do you think, with rapid charging, that is a problem that you're basically better off not rapid charging your car from a battery life point of view? So is that... Do you see people trying to do more of that or less of that? Or
we are in the we don't know. There is a famous taxi company in Cornwall.
Right.
Does nothing but rapid charge.
Okay.
And it's done about 160,000 miles, and it's a 24 kilowatt hour, and they're still running it.
And they haven't broken it yet.
Haven't broken it yet. So we don't know. There is the fabled solid state battery.
Yeah, which there's a few kind of coming.
And some say we've got them. And I spoke to the chief scientist of the Faraday Institution, and he said 10 years.
I did a podcast on battery cells a while ago, and there's solid state and there's solid state and there's the current. And I think some of what's been announced as solid state aren't what sort of pure sort of cell guys would actually class as solid state. So there's a bit of clever marketing going on around some of the near to market.
Yes.
They're not really true ceramic solid state batteries. They're kind of the electrolyte is a polymer, or they're basically different. So, interesting new technology to get past the quite volatile and sometimes dangerous electrolytes.
I think the area we haven't touched on at the moment, excuse me, is buses and trucks.
Yes. Yeah.
We don't know. So this is the one. I think the hydrogen debate for passenger cars is gone, but in trucks and buses, long distance buses and long distance trucks, I'm not sure where we're going.
Yeah, it's interesting that we have customers who do both. So we've got customers building fuel cell, and you can totally see the sense in that.
Yes.
It is much more complex and costly than a simple battery system. But yeah, for buses, trucks, marine, so ships, that's because that's a whole other transport vector. Aeroplanes, of course, as well. There's a lot of electrification happening in aircraft, and batteries you're not going to be able to fly from London to Sydney with a battery pack in an aeroplane anytime soon. So yeah, hydrogen's a really interesting topic. But I do agree with you that I think that for passenger car, or let's say 90% of passenger car. Yeah. It's solving a problem that doesn't really exist anymore.
The efficiency of the conversion from water to kilometre is about 30%.
Yeah.
BEV is about 70-80%.
Yeah.
It's just the amount of electricity you have to use for the same benefit is huge.
Yeah. Mind in one of the really interesting things that's panning out, and we're going to do a piece on this later in trucks. Has been the sort of little battle that started to happen with Tesla and Daimler on the efficiency and the battery range of the trucks. And Tesla came out and said, "Hey, we can go 500 kilometers, I think it was, on a battery." And the Daimler guys said, "No, it's ridiculous. It's impossible." And one of I think they sort of missed a few interesting things that they were able to do with the fully electric truck. So obviously Tesla started with a kind of basically ground up design for the truck, and it's really aerodynamic and it's got loads of sort of special features. So it's much more efficient per kilometre than a normal truck.
But I think the additional costs of a truck amortised over the piece part might fly. And I think we're going to get into this situation where the chemicals and the raw constituents of the battery might determine that we decide as a world economy that cars have batteries and trucks and buses have hydrogen. Yeah. Because we just don't have enough cobalt, etc., for the whole lot to be battery.
Yeah, okay, I see.
I mean, most of it's coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo,
which obviously is known for its workers' rights and
it's not really
stable politics. And
the other thing is, which we can't mistake, is there is a country which is rather large called China, which has bought a lot of the rights. So we might be forced down the hydrogen route to secure supply.
Do you see, because some people I know are talking about like alternate battery chemistries coming out which reduce the kind of rare material content. I don't know if there's some interesting. If you think where we went with batteries, we had sort of all the molten sodium salt things that were a bit of a nightmare to look after way back, and then lithium's been it's been a revelation, but now we've got all these rare chemicals, and trying to get to new battery chemistries that take those materials out and move to more available. There seems to be quite a bit of research in that area.
There's a lot of research, and it's a Nobel Prize area. Whoever delivers the 5-minute charge, 400 miles, totally safe, very cheap battery is going to be a superstar.
It doesn't have anything you have to dig out of the ground in anywhere.
But one of the things we've got to also compare is that if you build what they call a gigaplant, a 10 gigaplant or whatever, you're talking an awful lot of money.
Yeah.
An awful lot. So one of the challenges is going to be looking at the overall, it's amortized over the cost of the battery.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to look at the first trains are appearing as hydrogen to replace diesel.
Yeah.
Then there's hybrid ones. But I still can't see at the moment how a long distance 40-ton truck travelling from Aberdeen to Salisbury is going to do that on battery.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult for sure. It is interesting with the battery plants that are being built. You wonder if we might get locked into. So at the minute, a lot of the traditional OEMs are very wed to the capital investment they've made in engine plants.
Yes.
So then the transition to batteries has been difficult. But then we're going to end up with the same problem again with battery plants being sort of locked into particular chemistries and things. Or do you think, because you've been around more battery manufacturing plants than...
What Tesla had its own battery plants,
Yeah.
but they're actually Panasonic.
Yeah.
Nissan had its own battery plants.
Yeah.
And
They just sold them, haven't they?
Just before that,
Yeah.
Renault were going to take Nissan batteries.
Right.
Then Renault took LG cells
Yeah.
and made their own battery packs.
Mm.
So Nissan, or the way they've explained it is they've got to decommission ICE,
Yeah.
they've got to develop new cars,
Mm.
they've got to develop new batteries,
Yeah.
and build battery plants.
Yeah.
It's too much money.
A lot of capital to deploy. Yeah.
Huge amount.
Yeah.
And they're also, from what I've been told, struggling with the number of people who've got the skills to build battery plants.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. Wasn't the Nissan thing? Is that a joint venture with? That's a joint venture with someone, isn't it?
NEC.
NEC. That's right.
But the NEC contract restricted where they could sell them.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So there was a failed buyout, but there's another one underway, and hopefully what that means is Nissan get access to a battery supply.
Yeah.
But it's a double-edged sword. Nissan could buy from LG, or they could buy from them, or they could buy from somebody else.
I was wondering about that the other day with the potential of the 60 kilowatt hour Leaf, which is using LG cells, cannibalizing sales of the 40 kilowatt hour one. You know, whether or not that might present a problem for some of the packs. I think I did hear just last week there was an announcement about BMW, and they were talking about the cattle. So CATL are putting these new plants in Germany. You know, okay, that's interesting. Chinese building in Germany, but then there's another sort of separate announcement from BMW saying, but they're building product for us to our specification, and it's really.
Oh yes, yeah. Because one of the vehicles that they announced, Merc or BMW, is actually going to be built in China.
Yeah.
So it's being built in China with the Chinese battery.
And there's a lot of the Chinese market for EVs is potentially massive, isn't it? But it's
55% of the world.
Yeah, massive
consumption.
Restrictions though on you can't. It's very difficult to sell a car in China without domestic Chinese content.
They've also set an interesting rule that if you don't sell 8% EV by volume, you can't sell anything.
So sort of like the old, because California tried that, didn't they? But did they give up on that completely, or? But
China's a bit more in control than California.
Yeah, you will do it, or else sort of.
And but it's also providing a bit of a challenge for Toyota and others
who don't have an EV.
Yeah. So there are joint ventures in China now, where I think it's Toyota and Mazda are really trying to get something together.
Because people don't realise, but when you go to China, you realise quite quickly, because you pretty much, one of the first things most Westerners do when they go to China for the first time is get run over or almost run over by an electric moped. The Chinese government just outlawed ICE engines in two-stroke engines in mopeds, so that every moped on the road in China is electric.
Yeah, but it's also interesting. I went to the Beijing Electric Car Company, and I drove one of their cars. I don't know if you remember when Proton first arrived in the UK with that old Mitsubishi.
Yeah,
it was a bit like that.
Okay,
but interestingly, they're sold out.
Right, so it's not a great car, but they've sold out.
Government officials will drive one.
Yeah, I do think. I mean, with an EV, it does feel like it's easier to make a really nice. I got a taxi the other day, and the taxi driver was driving a new Leaf, and he's absolutely over the moon with it. But the interesting thing is he had a Mercedes E-Class before that. So again, I know he listens to these sometimes, so he might be listening to this. and he considered it an upgrade.
Yeah.
Mercedes E-Class to a Nissan Pulsar, but he was considering that to be an upgrade. And you know, he's right. Like the Leaf, new Leaf is so smooth, quiet, like refined. You'd never, with an ICE engine, like one of those little 1.5 diesels thumping away under the bonnet. It's quite hard to make that.
A little while ago, I was going to Lake District to a remote place. So I took Nissan's offer and I swapped the Leaf for a Duke.
Right, okay.
Oh boy, was I glad to give that back. Oh, stop-start technology at junctions, gears.
Yeah.
Oh, just have it back. But the other thing is, my daughter might listen to this, Emma. She keeps saying to me, Dad, why are you driving at 30? It's a 50 zone.
Yeah.
And I said, because I'm just comfortable. I'm listening to the music. There's no noise.
Yeah.
And what I find is I drive slower.
Okay.
Not necessarily to save the battery.
Yeah.
I just drive slower. And I was talking to the guy from British Gas who did a trial with electric vans, and he said they were concerned that accidents would go up.
Yeah.
Accidents actually went down.
Right.
Because the drivers were driving in a much calmer manner.
Yeah, I guess, and they've got, because you've got that really smooth acceleration, you don't have to worry about gear shifts. So particularly if you've gone from a manual car to an EV, it's like, you know, it's chalk and cheese. Yeah.
Well, I just on that, I used to, when I used to work for Nissan, we used to drive automatics, and we used to love just flooring it, and it would move off, you know, it would kick in.
Yeah.
On the Leaf, it is instant. And last week when I went down to Millbrook, I just hired a car and I got a Insignia. I think it was 2-litre automatic.
Yeah.
I came out the service station and I hit to go, and it didn't.
Yeah.
There was this lag.
Yeah.
Which you don't get with EV.
Yeah, it is. It's when we're doing a sort of presentation or conference, whatever, we have these like 3 trends, and there's sort of the clean air agenda, CO2 reduction, climate change agenda, but there's performance, and so many people have realised actually we can utilise that torque delivery to make a high performance vehicle.
Oh yeah,
which is a little bit ironic because of most of what we're trying to do with EVs, but it lends itself perfectly to like trucks and buses and off-highway machines because they use big thumping diesels that aren't very powerful, but they're massive engines because they need to give a lot of torque at low speed.
These series hybrids.
Yeah.
Fiska's got one, and the Nissan
eDrive
is a series hybrid.
Yeah.
So they're using the power straight through. I mean, the traffic lights, I love it when there's something black and German next to me, and I disappear.
Yeah.
And they scream past me going through the gears, and I just back off to 30 mile an hour. Yeah. Because it irritates them, but they just can't from a standing start compared to what that does.
And so you still get that, because I remember when we first gave cars part of the electric vehicle trials years ago, like all the people who drove them loved them. And after, how many years have you been driving an EV now? 5. So you still get that sort of sense of enjoyment out of it. I do wonder, so the sort of Tesla kind of 2.9 second stomach churning thing.
Insane button.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called, yeah.
Whether that wears off, you know.
I think it does. It still comes in handy, mind. If I'm at a road junction, I just knock it off eco, and I don't worry. You know, you can move. But because of where the battery is on that thing, the centre of gravity is really low, and it is quite fun. There is a road between Allenmouth and Warkworth. Yeah. It's lovely and twisty. Yeah. It's great on that because you play the game of not braking. You use the regen on the corners, and when you come to the end of the road, you got more miles than when you went in. Yeah. And you do it so it becomes a sort of game. Yeah. Like going in the Tyne Tunnel and coming out with more battery charge than when you went in. You can do that
by sort of regenning down the hill.
Down and taking it easy coming out. So on long journeys on B roads, it's quite fun. Yeah. Hence the new Leaf's got one pedal, which I haven't tried yet, but my colleague has and said it's all right.
That one pedal driving is because the thing with a lot of the current EVs, they were set up to sort of replicate how a petrol or diesel car feels under coasting, but then the Leaf has an option where you can turn this single pedal mode on, where you basically with the accelerator pedal accelerate or decelerate using the regen and having very strong regen. So you kind of maximise that, and people do seem to like it that go but it's very, very different to how you would drive a
well,
normal
I've got
car.
2 regen settings on that.
Right.
One is much more severe than the other.
Yeah.
So if I'm on a country lane,
Yeah.
I use the more severe one.
Oh, right. Okay.
So when I'm coming into a corner
Yeah.
and I know I'm in B Eco,
Yeah.
it brakes a lot more, so I know what it's doing.
Right.
And I get more power back. So I get about 30% regen on that.
Oh, wow. That's really good.
Mm.
That's a big. I think again the public sort of perception. A lot of people I think don't realise that one of the big, obviously with an EV you've got the transition from burning fuels, which is not massively efficient, to an electric drivetrain, which is like going from 40 to 50% efficiency to like 90% efficiency. So you've got that improvement. But then you've also got the regen. So you're recovering all this energy under braking, which of course you're not using the brakes as much then, so you don't have to change brake pads and discs as much, which is a big advantage
taxi
for
drivers
trucks.
are finding this.
Yeah.
You're seriously not going near it. When that goes in for a service, it costs me 120 quid and they change the pollen filter.
Right, okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing else.
So it's only for your hay fever that you have to worry.
Yeah, and because the service record says it has to be done.
Yeah, yeah. That's going to be a big disruption to dealership models and things, isn't it, down
People
the line?
like quick fit, etc. No exhaust replacements,
Yeah.
all this sort of thing. They're already looking at it. It's a problem.
Yeah, you can see that making a really big impact on the sort of automotive aftermarket. Yeah.
Nobody knows. I'll use it only once. The Brexit word.
Okay.
Nobody knows what's going to happen for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And to be honest, with this technology and driving habits and new economic models and new people coming in, nobody knows where this is going. You know, I say I've been in the car industry 45 years, and now it's getting interesting.
So on that, and I know you've got some interesting views on this, and we need to wrap up soon, but I do want to ask you what you think about autonomous vehicles, because that's going to be another big impact on...
I can sum this up quite easy,
Okay.
as I did with a guy down in London yesterday. I love Amsterdam.
Okay.
I like the centre of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
It has canals.
Yeah.
It has trams.
Yeah.
It has 500,000 tourists and 500,000 bikes.
Yeah.
If anybody can show me level 5 autonomy operating in the centre of Amsterdam, I'll believe it.
Okay. So for all the autonomous platform makers out there, there's a challenge. Yeah.
Let me say that happen. In the middle of Amsterdam, in the summer peak time.
Yeah. So you basically, from that, I guess you think it's still some way off being ready for market, or potentially never ready for market?
I think, and there's just companies today spending billions on it. I think it is a great engineer's plaything.
Right, yeah. Okay.
And everybody wants to prove it'll work.
Yeah.
But I think there are complexities, and the Americans won't give up their gun.
Yeah.
They won't give up the diesel, and then tell them they're going to give up the gun, the diesel, and their right to drive.
The steering wheel, yeah. Yeah. Give up your steering wheel, yeah.
Your gun and your diesel, and you're going to drive an electric car which you've got no control over at 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, constitutional right to something or other. Yeah, it'd be interesting
Not
to
to
see.
mention the French unions, when you tell all the lorry drivers and all the others they haven't got a job.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's another problem coming where, I mean, every industry has skills shortages, and whether or not this goes some way to sort of solving that problem. We've got this sort of generally aging population in the developed world, shrinking workforces, and I don't know. We're not going to answer it today.
There's an interesting question, and I think we're getting to the point where the human race, as we are, have been driven by corporate culture and technology, and at some point, a little bit like the scene in iRobot, when they just say, "Whoa, hang on, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
I'm the boss. I want to drive this thing, and I want to drive it this way."
Yeah.
And there's various things in life where we're being completely controlled, and I think at some point people will say, "I don't want this."
Yeah, I get that. I guess you've got sort of people who we are. One of the things I do think is we like you and I, because we live in the north of England, we're blessed with relatively short commute times. And when I go I was in Michigan the other week. Oh man, even Michigan traffic, and then Californian traffic is something else. And if you're sort of in a position where you've got to spend an hour, 2 hours a day in your car, at the minute, it's funny, so we're doing a podcast. Podcasts have really taken off because people listen to them when they're commuting, because they don't have their eyes. You've got to watch what you're doing, right? So you listen to a podcast while you're driving your car, and you're kind of doing something useful, although you could be just listening to random blokes talk about electric vehicles.
Just on short on this, the other day I drove to work and I thought, okay, I'm going to do this in fully autonomous.
Yeah.
Where we live up here, they're taking out a roundabout and they're building a 3-lane roundabout.
Yeah.
Between one night and the next night, they moved the cones and opened a new road.
Yeah.
I was caught unawares by it. It was a sharp left which wasn't there.
Yeah.
As I then got down to the Tyne Tunnel toll booth, somebody didn't have any credit on their card, and they were coming backwards towards me to then go a left across everybody else to get to the change machine to get some money.
Yeah.
So who's going to build the algorithms in the artificial intelligence for every single scenario like that?
Yeah, it's a big, it's definitely, there's a lot of work to do. It's a big task.
And I think the testing of all those scenarios for a French toll booth, an English toll booth, an Irish toll booth is going to be a long way off.
Yeah. So what's next then? So for you, next few years at Zero Carbon Futures, and for Colin, what do you sort of see the next kind of big things that you're going to be working on being?
I think for the next, till 2025, I think it's preparation for transition.
Right.
And I think that's where we'll be. In 2 years, hopefully, I'll be slightly retired by then. But I think we are in more of a transition mode than we think we are.
Right. Right. Do you feel like people are not preparing enough yet, and there's more to be done?
I think the market is, and the publicity is ahead of where we really are.
Right. Okay.
And I think there's a lot of catching up to be done. And I think the diesel situation is going to slow it down while we transition from diesel to petrol to hybrid to BEV. And I think the car companies have got their minds on something else at the moment. I don't think I've got one famous slide I use in one of the presentations. In 2014, I've got about 6 countries that forecast by 2020 they would have between them 4.3 million vehicles on the road.
Wow.
They've got 300,000 now.
Right. That's a huge change.
It's a huge change. Because the aspirations and the targets they set were basically, well, we'll politically say it's going to happen, therefore it will happen.
Yeah.
And the car company said, quietly, no, it can't happen that way. Yeah. And it's strange now, even though you point out that the Nissan Sunderland plant makes 50,000. That's it. Yeah. That people keep saying, but if we have a zero emission zone, they'll make more. Yeah. No, they can only make 50,000 batteries. Yeah. That's it.
Need to build another battery plant, and that can't happen overnight.
Or whatever. Yeah. But we still have politicians and people saying, I don't care. If we legislate, we'll get more vehicles. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the legislation's definitely helped.
Oh, it's got to help. It's what's going to drive it. Yeah. But I just wish the politicians would sit back and say, okay, we need a transition. Yeah. And the demonising of the diesel, I think, was a fatal mistake. And they're still doing it. Right. And it upset the market. Yeah. So the companies that we want to invest in EV are spending so much money rapidly trying to get out of diesel that they could have spent transitioning away from diesel.
Yeah, into EVs. Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a whole topic in itself. That's really interesting. Okay, right. Well, thank you. That's we've spent loads of time there. Really interesting. Thanks very much. If people want to find out more about Zero Carbon Futures, how do they find you? Website, which is
zerocarbonfutures.co.uk.
And you are very active on LinkedIn and social media and things. Yeah. So if they look for Colin Herron, they'll find you.
Oh, on LinkedIn. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for coming today.
Pleasure.
Okay, so that's all for today. I really hope you've enjoyed the podcast. If you have, don't forget to subscribe to our channel or hit like, leave us a review, and also send us any questions that you might have that you want answering. So we're starting to get questions coming in. We're doing specific podcasts related to questions that we're getting from people. So don't be shy. Send us your questions, anything you'd like to know that you think we could help with, and we'll try and put it into a podcast episode. So that's all from me for today, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.